What is going on, everybody? My name is Dakota, and welcome back to Cologne. Today, we're going to be going over a requested video, and that is going to be some of the fragrances that I love wearing around this time of year, predominantly Christmas time, maybe a Christmas Day fragrance. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, how I kind of wanted to build this list is I kind of wanted to put some higher tier, some mid tier, and some low tier, just because everybody's taste is going to be a little bit different. Everybody's price range is going to be a little bit different. So I thought it'd be nice to kind of build one off that could go well. So I've got 6 fragrances total. So we kind of put 2 in each. So we're going to go ahead and start off with probably the cheapest fragrance on this list, but that's okay because it's still a really good one. And for me, that's going to be Lattafa's Khamrah. So this fragrance I feel like is kind of underrated. This is obviously going to be an Angel Share, I don't want to say clone, but heavily inspired by. And for the most part, it does get relatively close to that. This fragrance has a beautiful warmth to it. It's got some praline in here, it gives it a little bit of a boozy nature, and it has really good performance. And this fragrance, for being, I guess you could call it cheapy or a clone style fragrance, actually has a little bit of depth to it. There's not the biggest change when you put this fragrance on, but there doesn't really need to be, because what you get on the opening of this is kind of where it needs to stay. Because on this one, you get a lot of beautiful sweets, you get some of that praline, you get the smallest touch like a wood note, and for the most part, for everything you get out of this fragrance, for the price point that you can get this fragrance at, because that's where this one kind of stands out, you can find these anywhere from 30 to 40 bucks. And for this profile, for the scent, that everything you get out of that is absolutely amazing. But for around this time of year, for around the Christmas time, for around the holidays, I want some sweets. I want some richness. I want fragrances that are going to be deep, that's going to be dark, that's going to have a lot of depth to it, some of which I want to have a lot of change, and some of them don't need to have a lot of change. This is just one of those, it's an easy reach for a cold day. It's going to be warm, it's going to be boozy, it's going to be relaxing, it's going to have an invitingness to it. And for the most part, in the cold weather, this doesn't really smell synthetic. It does have kind of a nice feel to it. So that's why this one's pretty much an easy reach for anybody that would want to wear a sweet, boozy one for this time of year. Alrighty, so next up on the list, this one is slowly moving up in price, but it's still very affordable, and that is going to be 1 Million Royal. So this fragrance, when it first came out, kind of took off like a rocket, and then it just kind of stalled out and is just kind of floating through there. Me personally, I really like this one. Until I got my hands on Elixir, this was actually my favorite 1 Million. It's got a youthful sweetness to it, almost a little playful, but it's also still mature. This doesn't have some of that like cloyingly sweet fragrances that some of the Paco Rabanne, or I guess just Rabanne now, that some of the Rabanne fragrances sometimes tend to have. To me, this was kind of the first one they went with that was maybe a little more matured. But one of the nicer things about this is, for the quality that you get for the fragrance that you get, the price point on this one's about that $50 to $60 range. So that does kind of play a big part in this. But this fragrance does smell very nice. It's very warm, it's very inviting. This is going to be a little more on the mass appeal side for some of the fragrances on this list, but it's still good though. For it being such a mass appeal fragrance, the blend on it was done exceptionally well. And like I said, for the price point that you could pick this up at, that's what makes this a really easy reach. You can tell this one and 1 Million Elixir are definitely from the same DNA. This one kind of having benzoing and some of that lavender with some of the wood notes that tend to set on the base of this, just kind of gives it a little more of a mature feel, kind of gives it a little more of like a mass appeal, relaxing nature that still fits this time of year exceptionally well. All right, so the next up on the list, and this one really shouldn't be too surprised, especially if you watch my channel very much, it's going to be Azzaro Most Wanted Parfum. This fragrance is probably one of, if not the easiest reach for this time of year. This fragrance has a beautiful blend of just the bourbon vanilla, red ginger. The way this thing is done up gives it a wonderful smokiness. And on top of that, the performance of this thing is just absolutely monstrous. When you put this on your skin, you're going to be met with such a nice, warm, smoky, sweet, a little bit of gourmand that is just going to last all day. That also smells incredibly natural. This is very much a thick fragrance. This is a heavy fragrance, but it's going to hit your senses very softly. This is going to be a little more on the more mass appealing side, but it's still going to be unique enough to where a lot of people should be able to want wearing this. Now, this fragrance in particular is gaining a lot of steam in popularity. So this one is slowly becoming one that for some people may be a slight harder reach, because this fragrance is gaining in so much popularity. A lot more people is going to be wearing this. We'll call it the Dior effect. When enough people start wearing this, other people is going to start hating on it because it's going to be too common. And a lot of people like to smell unique. And I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. I like to smell good. I like wearing fragrances that are going to make me happy, that I just enjoy wearing. Obviously, if my wife and the people around me like them, that's a plus too. But for the most part, wear something that's going to make you happy. And that's what this does. So yeah, but that is going to be the next one. That's going to be Azzaro's Most Wanted Parfum. And I've made a pretty good dent in this bottle. It's about half empty. I'm going to have to, that's going to be 2 bottle worthy right there. Alrighty, so the last 3 fragrances we're going to be going over, these fragrances are going to be a little more standoffish, and they're also probably going to be a little bit more expensive on the wallet. This next one, though, is not going to be so much. The next one is going to be Viktor & Rolf Spicebomb Extreme. As far as tobacco winter fragrances, this thing has a beautiful sweetness, has an incredibly rich tobacco, and it's not a harsh tobacco at all. The blend on this thing is incredibly smooth. On top of that, because this is a spice bomb, you're going to get a lot of that spiciness. You're going to get a lot of those warmths. You're going to get something that's a little bit edgy. Some people may even call it a little standoffish. But the way the blend was done on this, it really smooths everything out. This is by far Spice Bomb's best creation. That to me, this is the most smoothest. This is the most complete. And honestly, for the price point you can get this in, not really that bad. Normally, you can pick this up for sub 100 on discounters or somewhere in that nature. So for what you get, for the quality you get, for everything you get, it's rock solid value. Now, the only real drawback to this one is there is some people that the way the tobacco and the spices do blend together. To me, this is done very smooth. It's very well rounded. Some people's nose, for some reason, can kind of pick up on some of the harshness of the tobacco and the spices. And some people can say that this fragrance will smell very, very bitter to them. So this is not a fragrance that you should spray on heavy. Start light with this one and then kind of work your way up to it. But still, nonetheless, quality Christmas fragrance, especially for this time of year. So next up on the list on the Christmas Day festivities is going to be Tom Ford's Tobacco Vanille. Now, I was hard pressed to put this one on this. I honestly thought about not doing it, only because the way that Tom Ford has kind of diluted down the profile of this. As far as scent profile goes, this is still absolutely amazing. The beautiful richness that you get with just the tobacco and the vanilla. This has some dried fruits in it. It's got some of the cinnamons in it. This has a lot going on to it where you can kind of nitpick it just a little bit, but your overwhelming scent is going to be exactly what's in the name. This is going to be a very heavy tobacco and vanilla based fragrance. Now, as far as the tobacco goes on this, it's a little more artistic, you could say, because the tobacco on this is a little bit harsh. It's not really a pipe tobacco. It's more of like a cigar kind of tobacco. It does have some of that like resinous harshness to it, but you could call it an acquired taste. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love this fragrance. My only complaint about this fragrance is that at one point in time, this fragrance was a powerhouse. This was a monster performer. Well, in today's market, it's kind of hard to justify the price that Tom Ford pulls from some of his fragrances, given how this fragrance is extremely diluted down from what it used to be. I have a decant of an old Tom Ford. I think it was one of the first or second years that they released Tobacco Vanille. And it is so dark and thick, it almost looks like syrup. This newer stuff, it's much lighter, it's much more diluted. And unfortunately, the price of everything has only went up. But if you're not really worried about performance, if you're not really worried too much about price, if you're just looking for a fragrance that is going to be a beautiful quality scent based for the Christmas time or Christmas Day even, I had to put this one on the list because holiday seasons, this one screams out to me every holiday. I love wearing it when it's cold, and I love just wearing it around the house. This is one of those that I'll just put on and it'll just be a nice wear. It's one that's relaxing. Like I said, some people will find it harsh, but most people will find it maybe not inviting, but they'll definitely find it intriguing, to say the least, and never really in a bad way. So that's going to be the next one, and that's going to be Tom Ford's Tobacco Vanille. Alrighty, so next up on the list, so far we've covered sweet, so far we've covered tobacco, we've covered ones with a little bit of booze. Now it's time to cover one that kind of has a little bit of all three, and that is going to be Xerjoff Decas. This fragrance is going to be one of those that this may be the most standoffish on the list. This fragrance may be, you could call it the hardest to wear on the list. This is going to be one that's going to have tobacco, it's going to have benzoin, it's going to have a lot of sweetness to it. It's going to have a lot of overwhelmingness to it almost. This fragrance is incredibly rich. It has a lot of depth to it. This does have a little bit of a resinous feel to it, so on the opening it can smell just slightly synthetic. But if you're looking for one that's going to scream the holiday season, if you're looking for one that's going to scream Christmas, New Year's, this one can definitely be that, because like I said, this one is going to cover such a wide array of people's senses. This one is going to cover almost every box you could have, especially for a wintertime fragrance. If you want a little bit of citrusness, if you want a little bit of an animalic feel to it, if your nose is good, you can pick up plenty of sweetness out of this. You can pick up tobacco in this. Like I said, you do get some of the resin feels to it, but nothing about this fragrance is going to be harsh. This fragrance is going to hit the senses a little bit light. It's not one that you really have to spray heavy either, because the performance based on this is going to be very good. This fragrance is a big performer. So if you're just looking for one that you could say that's niche, that is probably going to be definitely different than what the average person is going to be wearing, you can lean into this one very easily. And this one has a beautiful presentation to it as well. So as far as a complete fragrance, as far as a fragrance that is going to give you presentation, profile, performance, and everything, one that will come with a niche price tag, but you could argue that it's going to be worth it, it's probably going to be this one. So I think that's going to get us wrapped up on this one. That's going to be Xerjoff Decas. Like I said, just beautiful presentation as well. So that's always nice. All right, I know I said I was only going to do 6, but I'm going to go ahead and throw in a 7th one in here. And this one is just for me, and this is my favorite fragrance. It should come as no surprise for everybody. That's going to be Herod by Parfums de Marly. If you're looking for a beautifully sweet, tobacco-based, that is probably going to be one of the smoothest smelling niche fragrances out there, this one's going to be it. I absolutely love everything about this fragrance. I love the cinnamon, the tobacco. If you find some of the older ones, they used frankincense in that, so that's going to give it a little more of a tartness. And it's just everything about this, I feel like, is for a niche tobacco sweet-based fragrances, which, and like I said in the past, whenever I look for a Christmas fragrance, whenever I look for a winter fragrance, I do tend to look for 3 big things. I look for rummy, tobacco-y, and sweet. This one kind of gives you almost all of that. It doesn't really have much of a rum flavor to it, but it does cover a lot of the fruity tobacco sweetness that almost everyone is going to love. Just had to go ahead and throw this one there as number 7. Couldn't help myself. I do think that's going to get us wrapped up for today. As always, thank everyone for watching. Thank you everyone for subscribing, for sticking around, for staying tuned, definitely getting more active in the comments. I definitely appreciate that. It's getting more fun taking review requests. And if these are the kind of videos y'all want to see, if these are the kind of videos y'all like to see, happily leave them in the comments. I will get around to doing them as quickly as I can. And if you do like what you see and you want to stick around, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Can't hurt. But that is going to get us wrapped up. As always, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.